While the salary cap keeps increasing, teams need to make wise decisions whether to gamble on overpaying their young players who might or might not become future All-Stars. Cleveland gave Evan Mobley 5 years, $224 million extension. Now 23 years old, known for his defense but lacks scoring. Many now conflicted whether he's just a good role player as a third and fourth option on a contender, or is he going to reach top 20 player status. Throughout the years, it's no accident why many teams continues to sink deeper into irrelevancy. Even consecutive lottery picks won't save them if their culture and front office just broken and dysfunctional on all levels. Heading into 2025, a couple bad teams many used to making fun of will continue getting laughed at for their lunacy, leaving them helpless for the near future. Absolute travesties, unforgivable decisions that will continue to haunt those franchises for the coming decades. Starting with Jim MacLeod of the Seattle Supersonics, the now OKC Thunder, the city still without an NBA team for almost 20 years, finally might get their wishes. After promising high-flying All-Star Shawn Kemp, who led his team to the finals, took Jordan's Bulls to 6, and even receiving a couple finals MVP votes, the once promising potential dynasty was supposed to take the next step, while the 7'1" center out of Wisconsin averaged just 2.1 points, 2.5 rebounds, first 2 seasons as a backup on the Bulls. The second rounder received a whopping 7-year, $33.6 million deal, an absolute abomination of a travesty. At the time of the deal, a no-namer made more than Karl Malone, Scottie Pippen, and Kemp. An infuriated Rayman demanded to leave the franchise, likely causing him to shorten his career and prevented a Hall of Fame slot. Centers being super essential for the 90s era. If you were just 7 foot tall, making the league, everything was golden. MacLeod averaged just 3.8 points, 4 rebounds in 18 minutes as a starter. First year of his deal, Seattle never made it past the semis in the George Karl era. Big man Jim never averaged above 4 points or 4 rebounds for any season. Career stats of 2.7 points, just over 3 boards. Managed to play just over 400 regular season contests. Scored double digits in 7 total career games over 7 seasons. After 97, the Kemp trade involved Vin Baker, Tyronn Lue, and Terrell Brandon, all combined 11 All-Stars. Brandon and Hill, no more All-Star appearance. Both Kemp and Baker made one more All-Star team in 98, then fell off to rapid declines. Seattle still managed to win 61 games in 98, only to get punished by Shaq's Lakers in the playoffs. The franchise enjoyed one more semifinals berth in 2005 before relocation. MacLeod traded to the Nets after 2 lackluster seasons, only to get less playing time, out the league by 28. Vin Baker, the 4-time All-Star, did his best work with Milwaukee. First season in Seattle, respectable 19-8 numbers as a starting center. Then the lockout year happened, came to training camp 20 pounds overweight, missed 16 games with knee and thumb injuries. His stat plummeted to just 13.8 points, 6 rebounds, 45% shooting, even worse than his rookie season numbers. In 34 contests, team elected to pay him 7 years, $86 million. Seattle franchise doubled down, knowing they can't get back a Shawn Kemp replacement. The 27-year-old put up 14 and 6 next 3 seasons before bouncing around 4 different teams in the span of 4 years, playing in an era lacking support for mental health struggles, battle with alcoholism and depression. Baker turned his life around and now an assistant with the Milwaukee Bucks. If it wasn't for these major contract mistakes, the Sonics might have still had their NBA team. Brian Reeves of the Vancouver Grizzlies, the 6th pick in the 95 draft, first rookie picked by the newly established franchise, now known as a meme player on a losing team, 6 total seasons, secured a 6-year, $62 million deal. Big Country came off averaging 15 and 8, then resulted in injuries and poor conditioning after getting paid. The franchise so bad, mismanaged with poor attendance, relocated to Memphis, having no real superstar, and giving most of its money to Big Country Boy. Just like many other players, Reeves lost his abilities during the lockout, an absolute travesty of an 87 and 308 career record, winning no more than 20 games in a single season. His career record can't get much worse. Had a degenerated disc on his back, forcing early retirement at 28. Longtime fans will always give him blame for the Grizzlies' relocation, but regardless of opinion, Reeves done an amazing job for himself, maximizing his dollars for a 6-year career. Joe Smith of the Minnesota Timberwolves, arguably the biggest factor why the franchise failed to surround Kevin Garnett with good pieces, forcing a blockbuster trade to Boston. The #1 pick in the '95 draft never lived up to the hype, weirdly turned down $80 million from Golden State, agreed to one of the most shady below market value deals with Minnesota, promising to pay him more money under the table, 3 oddly one-year deals to get his birthrights, planning to pay him 7 years $86 million in 2001, franchise being incompetent, caught red-handed, next 4 first-round draft picks stripped, punished by David Stern, Smith's contract voided, spent 1 year with the Pistons before returning to Minnesota on a 6-year $34 million deal, capping out the franchise, mortgaging their future on him. Team going all in on the disappointing first pick, who's nothing more than a role player, burned the franchise, traded to Milwaukee in '04. Smith's best contribution helped the Wolves land Sam Cassell. Team would make 1 conference finals in '04 before Garnett missed the playoffs each of his next 3 seasons before getting traded. It took the franchise 20 more years to make it back to the conference finals under a much better GM Tim Connolly. One terrible decision crippled the franchise for nearly 2 full decades. On to the pathetic Washington Wizards franchise. They haven't won 50 games in a season since the 70s. Gave Juwan Howard max dollars, a good stats back team guy, 1 All-Star appearance, justified the franchise giving him the max before getting traded in '01. Then the Jordan comeback, many pretended his tenure in DC didn't exist. If the greatest player in history couldn't help bring the franchise back, nobody can. Post-MJ era, rising star point guard Gilbert Arenas became one of the best scorers, multiple postseason berths, but the 25-year-old tore his ACL late 2007 regular season, never the same, 13 games played in '08, somehow all for 6 years won 11. Post-injury, 55 more games with the nation's capital, his accomplishments overshadowed by the gun incident with Javaris Crittenton, traded to Orlando early 2011 season. Franchise also signed Andre Blatch, 5 years $35, which led to the John Wall era. The #1 pick of the 2010 draft had a true case being the second best player in the East back in 2017, gone as far, taking Boston to 7 in the semis. That's as far as the franchise went since '79, coming off multiple injuries. The 5-time All-Star signed 4 years $170 million max extension, missed half the 2018 season, had to undergo season-ending heel surgery after 32 games in the following year, then suffered a torn Achilles at his home. 5 years since then, 74 more total games played. Wall an absolute shell of himself. 2019 was the last time John Wall put on a Wizards uniform. The first year of his insane contract kicked in when he missed the entire 2020 campaign. Then reports of him being unhappy that Washington elected to build around Bradley Beal. Wall shifted to Houston for the Westbrook package, later known for being an empty stats guy, would badmouth the Rockets when he was with the Clippers, only to be traded back, then waived. One of the most tragic downfalls the league has seen in recent times. The franchise, instead of blowing it up after Wall's departure, doubled down on Bradley Beal. In his prime, had his best statistical seasons, 3 years of nearly 29-point average, but just empty stats. Became injury prone after summer 2022. Beal was already declining, signed a ridiculous 5 years $250 million contract with a no trade clause. After only making 1 playoffs in 2021 since Wall's injury, mostly due to Russ Westbrook's greatness, franchise still trying to compete with a bootlegged Big 3 trio of Kuzma and Porzingis, 35 wins. Beal missed 32 games, traded to Phoenix in the Chris Paul deal. If the franchise just straight up rebuilt it earlier and got rid of Beal in 22, the Wizards might have landed Wemby, but they're too dumb to be capable of thinking like that. Now they can enjoy their French imposter, Alex Starr, who's been looking like an absolute travesty in Summer League. Otto Porter Jr., franchise forced to match the Nets offer, 4 years $106, only Mr. Injury prone, 2018 his last fully healthy season, a good 3-and-D starter, but nowhere near star quality. Some believe Porter's bad contract crippled the franchise from contending due to the team failing to land Kevin Durant in 2016. They just kept blowing money on the wrong guys who weren't good enough, leading to Ian Mahinmi, a career 5-4 guy who was gonna turn 30 years old after career highs of 9-7 with Indy, signed a ridiculous $64 million deal, even having less success in Washington, being nothing more than a backup center, only played above 40 games 1 time in 4 seasons, made 0 impact in the playoffs. A couple more good pieces, the Wizards likely beat Boston and get to the conference finals. Mahinmi never played another NBA game after his contract contract expired, the atrocious Ernie Grunfeld panicked signing him, and also giving Andrew Nicholson 4 years 26, just played 26 games with the franchise. A borderline NBA player who lasted 5 total seasons, ended up with the Trailblazers. His contract stretched and paid for 7 years, getting paid more years for not being in the NBA than his actual NBA career. No matter how much we know, we learn something new every day. This Wizards franchise deserves to be investigated for their stupidity. Give us Davis Bertans 5 years 80. No wonder they keep stinking. Only 3 more years of King of Memes master Jordan Poole and the laughable duel of the light-skinned bros off the books 2027. Stan Van Gundy's entire Pistons tenure set the franchise 10 years backwards. Joe Dumars trading away Chauncey Billups truly cursed the team in unforgivable ways. Before even Stan, the start of the 2010s, Ben Gordon left the Bulls. Detroit gave him 5 years 58, became a shell of himself, essentially never heard from again. And Charlie Villanueva, 5 years 38, would have been Rookie of the Year if it wasn't for Chris Paul. Then came the erratic Josh Smith, 4 years 54, the biggest laughable Chuck Master, never listened, waived after a season and a half, stretched his salary, paid till 2020. Van Gundy's tenure, most memorable for King of No Spacing. Smith, Drummond, and Greg Monroe starting together, my goodness. Jeff Bauer also signed John Lure 4 years 42 mil in the summer of bad contracts, a player many of you never even heard of. With a combination of bad draft picks, having no identity, picking up tons of failed lottery picks like Don Maker, Kevin Knox, Marvin Bagley, and James Wiseman, too many young players trying to develop with no shooting. Also giving Monty Williams 6 years 78 only to be ousted in a year. Hard to imagine the team's future getting any worse from this point going forward. The Portland Trailblazers wasting Dame Lillard's prime only if Dame Dollar left a little earlier, being overly patient with the awful front office, wasting away their franchise player. The very good but not good enough backcourt of Lillard and McCollum, similar to Lowry and DeRozan out east, but Toronto went after Kawhi Leonard and won a title. At the end of the day, both Lillard and the franchise moved on. After an overachieving 2016 campaign, despite the departures of LaMarcus Aldridge, Wes Matthews, and Nick Batum, Portland made it to the semis, but signed mediocre players to fat contracts. The atrocious Allen Crabbe, 4 years $75 million, Evan Turner, 4 years $40, Miles Leonard, 4 years $41, Maurice Harkless, who was solid, 4 years $40, and Festus 0 games played since the embarrassing Game 7 2016 finals. Also got a bag, filling up their cap space with no leverage. The Bats' summer signing spending spree hampered the team for years. 2 straight first-round sweeps, franchise forced to sign back Nurkic, 4 years $48, their only realistic option being limited, leading to 2019's improbable conference finals run, swept by Golden State, but making it to round 3 gave the organization false hope, leading to no changes, gave Dame a supermax and CJ 3 years $100 million extension, losing out on key role players only to scramble on the much older Hassan Whiteside and Carmelo Anthony. Lillard will go on to play his best individual basketball, posting high scoring numbers but with no defensive identity, and the front office not being straightforward with Lillard resulted in massive failure each of his last 2 seasons with Rip City. The Philadelphia 76ers, from the tanking process a decade ago to still no conference finals to show, franchise superstar Joel Embiid dominates all regular season, put up monster numbers, but allergic to getting past the second round. Every year goes by and still no real playoff success, now having to depend on the older Paul George. After the devastation of Kawhi Leonard's shot, the awful decision, GM Elton Brand gave Al Horford 4 years $109, struggled to fit alongside Embiid, traded to OKC, that required additional assets, only to be traded back to Boston and be matched up with Philly the 23 playoffs, locking down the MVP. While the terrible, pathetic, absolute travesty of 0 points Tobias Harris, $180 million disgrace, destroyed the franchise's hopes of adding more key pieces, This is why teams should never give a max to a non-all-star player, even hated by Philly fans more so than Ben Simmons. Absolutely pathetic, embarrassing, outplayed by deep on the bench Knicks players making the minimum. Harris gave no efforts, no hustle plays, not good enough to be a second or third option as a scorer on a good team, also having zero role player qualities. Even now, with Paul George, Philly is still not projected to make it past the second round, with teams like Boston, New York, and Milwaukee contending. Tobias now stuck on the awful Pistons where he belongs. If Embiid never gets past the second round one time in a Sixers uniform, Tobias Harris will always be a big part of the blame. Ben Simmons getting the 5-year max as a rookie extension 2019, franchise chose to disgrace #1 pick and Tobias over Jimmy Butler, who carried Miami to 2 finals runs. A mismanaged franchise with no accountability, held to their star players, trusting Ben Simmons, Tobias, Josh Richardson, and Horford. The four played 39 games together instead of believing in Jimmy Butler. 2020 a first round sweep, but Simmons' poor attitude and refusing to shoot in the clutch destroyed his reputation, has not been the same since. Of course, the Knicks, with savior Jalen Brunson and the Nova studs having a bright future with the brilliant Leon Rose, many already buried the Isaiah Thomas GM days throughout the 2000s, from Allen Houston being injury prone to Jerome James, Eddie Curry, Jared Jeffries, other awful contracts that could have easily destroyed a franchise. The Lakers signing of Timothy Mozgov and Luol Deng, 64 and 72 mil. If it wasn't for LeBron and AD helping the franchise win the title and taking their talents to LA, the Lakers under the Buss family might still have not won a playoff series since 2012. Chandler Parsons, 4 years, 94 with Memphis. At least the franchise rebuilded, and we look forward to the John Moran, Jarrett Jackson era. Eric Dampier signed 7 years, 73 mil in 2004. Would have been a nightmare for Dallas had Dirk demanded out, but stuck through the tough times. Landed Tyson Chandler, a viable center to help Nowitzki get over the hump. Sean Kemp's 7 years, 107 deal sank the Cavs all the way to the bottom before LeBron's arrival, followed by the 2016 title, made all the past sufferings worth it for Cleveland fans. Nicholas Batum, 5 years, 120 with Charlotte. Bismack Biyombo, head-scratching 4 years, 72 with Orlando. Neither one of those teams were accomplishing anything with or without them in the first place. With many bad contracts heading to 2025, some near impossible trade circumstances, how many bad signings, whether through free agency, trades, or contract extensions in the last 2 years will derail an entire franchise for the next decade? Your thoughts on the comments below. See y'all next video.